Hi everyone, it's me, Camilla, also known as She's So Fabulous. I'm delighted to join you on my YouTube channel today with video number 3. And yes, I'm well aware it's been a very long time since video number 2 and an even longer time since video number 1. But I never promised that I was going to do regular videos on my channel. I actually quite like keeping it a place where I post things as and when I feel the inspiration strikes me. The purpose of my video today is part of a collaboration with a shop called Lush Cloth, which you may or may not have heard of. Now, I have used Lush Cloth several times in the past, most notably to make a really lovely Rosa shirt. Rosa is a pattern from Tilly and the Buttons, so I made it in the long style using a really nice red Lady McElroy fabric. And you can see pictures of it either on my Instagram page, which is at She's So Fabulous, or on Lush Cloth's blog. It was quite a while ago now, but I'm sure if you scroll, you will be able to find it. For my video today, I've been sent some fabric for free, and all I have to do is make something with it and document my make. So, as you can see here, my fabric is still packaged. I thought I would open it with you guys on camera and then explain what I'm going to be making. So, let's open it up and see what I've got. So I went for a stretch fabric today, and I haven't put a stretch fabric video on my YouTube channel yet. So it has got a really lovely pattern on it, as you can see, of leaves and flowers. And it's difficult to see in this lighting, but it is ever so slightly pink. It's got a slightly blushed colour in the background. And what I'm going to make with this is a dress for the first day of school. So I'm a teacher currently on my summer holidays, and the first day of term is not that far away now. So I thought it would be a lovely way to use this very lovely fabric. So in order to show off this fabric, I have decided to make something from the Tilly and the Buttons stretch book. Now, I have had this book for a while, but I have yet to make anything from it because I'm one of those people who buys loads of books and I read through them and I get really excited and then they go up on my shelf, not to be looked at again for a very long time. So I thought this was a great opportunity to finally sew something for this book. And the make I am going to try is this one, the Joni Dress. Now, I really like this because it's got a very nice detail on the neck where it's got a sort of twist on the bodice, which I thought was a really, really nice detail to try. I have never made this dress before, and I cannot guarantee that my finished one will look exactly like this because I may well tinker around with the sleeves or the overall design or whatever, but this is the basis for my make. So we've got this fabric, we've got the Joni dress. So my next step is to trace out the pattern, because in these Tilly and the Button books, all the patterns are at the back on these big sheets of paper. So you have to find and trace your size, cut it out, cut out your fabric and get started. So that is going to be what I do next. I've now cut out my pattern pieces and you can see them on the table in front of me. It was a nice easy pattern to trace and cut out as there were only 5 pieces. So my first piece is the neckband. I will need to cut out 2 of those on the fold, and this arrow shows me where the fold should be, as it's quite easy to get confused once you've got the pattern pieces and the fabric in front of you. I've got a back bodice where I'm going to cut 1 out on the fold. There's the fold there. I've got the front bodice where I'm going to cut out 1 on the fold there. I've got 2 sleeve pieces, here they are, and I've got the skirt piece where it's the front and the back, and I'm cutting out 2 pieces on the fold, which is here. Now, I do not trace over all of the notches. The only notches that I transfer over are for the sleeves. Now, this is a bit of a shortcut because where I've been sewing for a while, I don't really need to transfer over the notches, but I find the sleeve ones are very useful so that you can tell where the back and the front of the sleeve should be. Otherwise, it won't fit right when you come to put it on. So my next step is that I'm going to cut out my fabric and I will be right back. So here's my pattern pieces all cut out and ready to go. I can already tell that it's going to have a really nice drape. If you look at this skirt piece, it's already got a nice shape going on. It's quite a sort of circular cut, so it's going to look nice when it's made into a dress. So now I'm ready to consult the book and begin sewing. So step 1 deals with the front bodice, and it requires putting a line of stay stitches in at the top and at the bottom over here. Now, the purpose of stay stitches is to stop the fabric from stretching out unnecessarily, which is why they're at the points here where the fabric will twist over to create that twist detail at the neck. So I'm going to go and do that on my regular machine, and I will be back with the next step. Now that I've sewn in my line of stay stitches, I've done the next step, which is to snip into each end like this and to fold that seam allowance back. So I haven't cut through the line of stitches, I've cut up to it and folded it back out of the way, and I've done that on the top and on the bottom. And the next thing I'm going to do is to sew this folded over seam allowance onto the neck and onto here. So I'm going to put a line of stitches here, again with my regular machine. And I should have said, when you're sewing on stretch fabrics, you need to use a zigzag stitch. This is because when the fabrics stretch, if you use a straight stitch, the stitches will break. So whenever you're sewing on stretch fabrics on a regular machine, you need to use a zigzag stitch. That's a very important tip. So I'm going to go and sew this seam allowance to my neck and the bottom of my bodice, and then I will be back with the next step. The next step is to create this twist in the middle. So it'd be a bit tricky for me to show you with one hand holding my camera. So what you do is you hold it in the middle and then you twist this one over. So you twist it from top to bottom and then you twist it from top to bottom again so that it is right side up, and then sort of just rearrange so that it looks nice in the middle. Don't worry about stray threads and things like that because those will be covered up when things are all sewn together. So what you should have at this stage is a bodice with a fold in the middle and both right sides facing upwards. So now I'm going to go on to the next step. So next I have to finish off the bodice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half like this, and I'm going to sew together these two halves. So I'm going to pin them together from this clip notch all the way down to the bottom, and then I'm going to sew them with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now my front bodice is sewn together here. I'm going to go on to the next step. Okay, the next step is to sew together your front bodice and your back bodice. So as the front bodice is already on my table, I'm going to lay my back bodice on top and join it up at the shoulders. So you need to be nice and accurate when joining the pieces together so that you get a nice shape of your bodice. Now when it comes to the sewing, you're going to sew everything with a 5/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I do everything on my overlocker because I much prefer sewing stretch fabrics on an overlocker. But however, if you don't have an overlocker, a regular machine is fine. Just remember to use that zigzag stitch. So I'm going to pin, and then I'm going to go and sew, and then I'll be back. Slight correction to my earlier instructions regarding the pattern pieces. I told you that you need 2 of the neckline pieces. In fact, you only need 1 cut on the fold. That was my mistake. I had copied down the instructions wrong onto the pattern. So as you can see here, I have folded my neckband piece in half, and I am going to iron it so that it has a nice crease down the middle. Now I've got this really good mat that I use where you can pin things on and iron as well, and it's nice and small so it fits on my desk so I don't have to have an ironing board taking up my space in my sewing room. So I'm going to do that, and then I will join you again for the next set of instructions. The next step is to pin the neckband onto the bodice of your garment. Now this step is a little bit fiddly, so I advise that you take it slowly. So you can see here in front of me, my neckband, still folded in half, has been pinned onto my garment. It's very important at the start and the end that you tuck it around that snipped notch that you did at the beginning, because then that will sit nicely against this twisty knot at the front. Now a neckband is always designed slightly shorter than the bodice of the garment you're sewing it to. This is so that it will sit nice and flat on the finished piece. So you don't pin it all the way around, you pin it in a couple of places. So I've pinned it at the beginning and I've pinned it in the middle, and then you slightly stretch the bodice to fit the neckband as you sew. So you sew it in pieces in between the pins. So that's what I'm going to go and do now on my machine, and I will be back for the next step. Now that my neckband is attached, as you can see here, the next thing I'm going to do is to fold it underneath and stitch using a zigzag stitch so it's nice and neat around the neckline, and I will be back once I have done that. So there's my finished neckline, which is pretty neat considering it's the first time I'm sewing this pattern. So now I'm going to go on to the next step. The next step is to attach our sleeves. So you can see I've laid my bodice out flat on the table, front bodice and back bodice, and I'm going to attach my sleeve here. So remember I said the importance with sleeves of marking out the notches. I've got 2 notches here which show me the back of the sleeve, 1 notch in the center to show me where the shoulder is, and 1 notch here to show me where the front of the sleeve is. So I'm going to basically pin my sleeve on like this, so that once it's pinned, it comes out like this to be the sleeves with the right side where it's supposed to be. So I'm going to pin it, and then I'll show you what it looks like once pinned, because trying to pin and film at the same time means that the camera goes a bit wonky. So let me pin it and I'll be back to show you what it looks like. So now that I've pinned it, you can see what I mean. I've pinned right side to right side so that the sleeve unfolds like this. So the next step will be to stitch my sleeves to my bodice, and then I'll be back to show you what happens after that. Okay, this is starting to come together now. As you can see, I very nearly have a bodice. So the next step is to pin the sleeves and the side seams together and to sew them so that the bodice is complete. So that is my next step. Hello. So I thought as my bodice is done, I would try it on just to have a quick fit check. I'm happy with the way it looks so far, so I'm ready to go onto the skirt. These last couple of steps are really nice and easy. So I've got my two skirt pieces laid out one on top of the other, as you can see in front of me, and I'm going to sew them together along the side seams there and there. And then once I have sewn them together along the side seams, it will be time to attach them to the bodice. But I will show you what that looks like momentarily. So first step, sewing the side seams. I will be back shortly. So the final step is to attach my skirt to my bodice. So I've got them on the table in front of me here. I've got the bodice inside and it's right side up. I've got the skirt on the outside and it's wrong side up. The purpose of this is so that you have both of the right sides together inside the dress. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pin and then sew. Now to make sure everything lines up, I pin the side seams, I pin the center, and then I pin in between to make sure everything lines up perfectly. Once that is done, all that will be left is to hem the sleeves and to hem the bottom of the skirt. So fingers crossed, we are nearly there. Off we go. Okay, as you can see, I am done. So before I show you pictures of the finished piece, just a couple of things to note. So obviously this was my first time sewing the pattern, so it might not have been the most efficient way of doing each one of the stages, but everything that I did worked and I have ended up with a very wearable dress. Number two, if you want to attempt this pattern, I would suggest if it's your first time sewing with stretch fabrics, maybe start closer to the beginning of Tilly and the Buttons Stretch Fabrics book, because bits of it are quite fiddly. The twisty neckline is fiddly, the neckline binding is quite fiddly, and I wouldn't advise it as a first stretch fabrics project. If you know what you're doing with stretch fabrics, then absolutely give it a go. It was quite fun to sew. I really enjoyed making it. It's a really, really lovely shape, and I'm excited to show you what it looks like in just a second. So if you've got any questions or anything, then please feel free to drop them below. You can also find me on Instagram at She's So Fabulous, and I hope I will see you again soon. Bye.